Extras.
So this episode covers another chunk of events which were happening around the same time as Angel's Home Alone battle in Polaron at the gaming table. Chronologically, the main events of this video actually happened first, but as previously explained, with the party split we were going back and forth and not always in the most consistent manner. Again, I think you can see why ideally I would have liked this and Angel's battle to fit in the same episode, but even with a lot of reused elements, I ended up doing a fair chunk of animation work for the Polaron battle, had to draw the Dragonborn and the Archaeologist. At least splitting the episodes let me put the appropriate amount of time into some of the more ambitious, for my skill level, animation elements I wanted to show here. I had wanted to hit the party with a Diluvian monitor for a long time, obviously. I had actually built one 3 or 4 times, but as so often happens in a role-playing game, the combination of player characters' decisions and focus on whichever story or encounter idea was most interesting to me at any given point in time all caused the anticipated monitor fight to fail to happen again and again and again. I would never claim that the story points in my game are always the most logical from a world-building or narrative perspective. But I do like to think about those things all the time. I have a strong feeling of, would this make sense in the world, that led me to set up possible monitor battles based on certain conditions, and then those conditions kept failing to come together. The first time it was really close was when they teleported out of Little One's mother's cave, partway through traversing the Diluvian-controlled coastland of Larek, the so-called Peace Bond lands. They had been forced to largely abandon stealth and had cut a swath through the local military forces. Those forces tend to be pretty complacent. They catch people periodically sneaking around and execute them, but they haven't been seriously challenged in a long, long time, with the possible exception of a couple trolls down south. So all the casualties inflicted by the party were a real shock to the system. This attracted the attention of the area's commander, who requested a monitor to eliminate the threat. That monitor was tracking them down. Angel may be like a ghost, but the party as a unit was not hard to follow at all. And if they had followed their original plan to head back to Bankton, pick up DDF, and teleport from there, the monitor definitely would have caught up with them. As you know, they had plenty of chance to fight Diamondfin Coda when he showed up at Castle. I really like that they took that particular situation so seriously and, despite being conflicted, Little One and the others took what I think is the most heroic route by not selfishly going for the glory, allowing the Monitor and the Peace Envoy to leave. But as mentioned in the extras at the time, I had definitely planned for that battle. There were some other occasions where I thought I could justify a Monitor battle, as in having it make sense and not just be a random encounter, but I don't even recall where those were right now. They were all much less likely, and once the party entered the Uruk tunnel, it would have gotten really hard to justify a monitor. Them finding and following the tunnel for a long-ass time was a turn of events I had only vaguely planned and hadn't really anticipated, even though in hindsight it's hard to imagine it going another way. But it's hard to fault my contemporaneous prediction that the most likely path was that they would make Hag lead them to Del in the desert, fight him there, and generally do orc stuff. But anyway, all this is to say that I really wanted to work in the missed monitor count, to have it slide partway on screen and get stuck, push again, not make it, and then get retracted, just whip back off the screen as the door was blown off. I like that both as a dramatic touch and as a gag, had a different and separate scene in my head of how to do the reveal, and they didn't work together. Ultimately, I believe the version that played out in the video was better drama and storytelling. It fit better into the music score and the narrative as a whole, but I lament the lost opportunity. Should have a missed opportunity count. In terms of stats and balance and all that, I was encountering a problem. They'd missed monitors and fought other stuff for so long, accumulated so much loot, and leveled up so many times, they were getting to be too strong for regular name-rank monitors. I mean, I make the rules. I can just make monitors more and more powerful and just keep scaling them up. But there are a pretty significant number of name-rank monitors in the world, and therefore, for all their legendary power, they have to be weak enough that while a monitor can wipe out an army, most of them can't take on a huge army or an army with skilled or powerful leadership. There are limits, and there has to be a real demarcation between these guys, the rank-and-file version of the ultimate elite warrior, and the Deathfins, the real holy shit encounters. But by splitting the party, the players had presented me with an unusual opportunity. Not only were most of them in a part of the world where I could more easily justify the presence of a monitor, much easier than Uruk and Polaron, but the party was under strength for once, meaning I had a chance to try and get a good fight out of a regular monitor without even genetically engineering him to fight BCs. With Angel, Mora, Liz, and Rainbow Dash not there, if I could get them to fail any stunning fist saves, I would get much better value because of the smaller number of targets, which might just give Hazov a fighting chance. Not to win, but to feel dangerous and maybe kill someone. In practice, the fight was pretty short and weird. Black's Zealot pack obliterated poor overconfident Hazov. Little One got to do literally nothing, double stunned twice by the monitor's supercharged stunning fist attacks. I struggled with the overcomplicated, non-transparent rules I had invented, for some reason, to govern the Diamondfin's custom Relentless Tides stance. The explanation in the video is very streamlined compared to the way too much rules text in my notes. Pulling back the curtain a little, the encounter opened with what you could fairly call arbitrary setup. There was no realistic way for the PCs to anticipate or prevent the initial sniper shot, which disrupted Draven's teleport, though there was no way the shot could be fatal with Draven's HP. And the monitor's entrance was similarly written for drama and a little fuzzy rules-wise. Blowing the door open with an alchemical explosion feels reasonable with what we know of KT alchemy, but I never bothered detailing the mechanism, and Hazov didn't spend any actions on it the first round. The other dubious thing was opening with his powerful Lawbearer's Charge, his highest level maneuver. Little One was the closest to the door, but if his alignment wasn't chaotic, it would have been a pretty weak move, and the monitor didn't actually have any way to know. He was going in blind, knowing only the number of enemies in a room with the target, and as far as he knew, GE7, a 7th level cleric, was probably the most powerful person there. Once we get into the fight, though, I think the balance was actually pretty fair. For any of you who are accustomed to 5th edition D&D, Diamondfin Hazov's Stunning Fist DC of 26 seems insane. And it is abnormally hard save for characters of their level, but you have to remember that numbers are flattened out in 5th, which is actually a good thing in many ways. But regardless, in 3rd edition, characters to hit bonuses and good saving throws scale up faster, and they can stack on a lot more bonuses. When you factor in the extra gear from having an Artificer in the party, Hazov was actually really lucky to land 3 out of 4 stuns in this short period. If the difficulty had been 3 or 4 points lower, which would still be considered quite high, Black and Little One would have been almost immune to it, and it would have been more like a coin flip against Draven. Little One wasn't kidding. He had probably a 2 out of 3 chance to pass and was quite unlucky to fail both times. If you're wondering where DC 26 comes from, remember that Kuatoa, for whatever reason, have a racial +4 wisdom. Just another of the reasons that I see them as having a powerful connection to their goddess, developing a powerful theocracy, and evolving the ultimate warrior monks. With his +4 stat item, Hazov achieves a wisdom score of 24, so that's +7 DC right there. My monitor prestige class, the true, aka monster version, gives them piles of bonus feats, and that allowed him to have rapid stunning and the powerful pain touch feat, which causes nausea the round after the stun, which is almost the same thing as doubling the stun to 2 rounds, which is nuts. But he also has +1 DC from Falling Sun attack, +2 from Ability Focus Stunning Fist, and +3 from the Sapphire Fist Incarnum feat from Magic of Incarnum, with 3 Essentia invested in it. Now that's a super powerful ability against the partial party, because they have fewer damage dealers. DDF and GE7 clearly don't count. However, Hazov was otherwise not well engineered to fight them. A good chunk of his abilities were aimed towards fighting swarms of weaker enemies. His Deathmark's area damage, the many attacks from Flurry of Blows, if he doesn't move around, and his Relentless Tide stance provides a big damage boost, but only if he hits 3 different targets in a round, with individual melee attacks, so Deathmark only counts against the initial target. This was actually pretty hard to arrange, since he had to move in order to stop Graven's wand attacks, whereas he needs to stay in place to full attack and use Flurry of Blows. Now, if the PCs had average luck on the Fortitude saves, they would have had another 2 rounds of Little One or Draven acting, which, had I not allowed Black Zealot Pact, would have mostly balanced out that crazy double damage, so the fight wouldn't have been much longer. Really, he was in over his head. But yeah, I'm glad the fight seems fairly exciting in the video, because it would be easy to spin it as a weird anticlimactic battle. This was my last chance to make a decent, regular monitor battle, though, and hopefully they will find out, later on, that Deathfins, with techniques learned from their monastery's ancient scrolls, are in a whole other league. The sniper was theoretically still supporting Hazov in combat, something the monitor would surely have complained about later, but Elite Scout Sauto had different orders. He was supposed to take a second shot, but by the time he had reset all his shit, the monitor died, and it would have accomplished none of their goals, so after seeing how dangerous these unexpected enemies were, he chose to simply disappear. The video does give some indication of how this crossbow sniper was doing what he was doing from such ludicrous distances, but you could easily miss it, or not quite get how he put together all these various abilities. Sauto's main build is an Unseen Seer prestige class from Complete Mage, a roguish partial spellcasting class which advances sneak attack, and lets you learn a couple of divination spells from other classes' spell lists. He uses his divinations to locate and track targets, including using clairvoyance to see what is going on inside the lab, and to give me an excuse for how he is even targeting a party member at all. I mean, to identify targets. But how do you snipe in a fantasy setting? Sauto has a custom, oversized +3 heavy crossbow designed to be affixed in place on a bipod. It takes a standard action to set up, a move action to break down, like switch back to freehand, and when used freehand, its enhancement bonus is reduced by 1 to +2, and it suffers an additional -2 penalty to attack rolls. But this oversized crossbow, halfway between a ranged weapon and an artillery piece, has exactly the same range as a normal heavy crossbow. The range increment is 120 feet. You get -2 to hit per range increment, with a max range of 10 times that, 1,200 feet at -20 to hit. Which is fine, but even though targets at that range are probably flat-footed, even a sniper of Sauto's caliber isn't going to hit anything with -20 to hit, and B, his perch on the rocks above the Corso stronghold was more like 1,600 feet from the lab, which won't hit even on a natural 20, because out of range means out of range. Sauto overcomes this via a series of buffs, which literally takes multiple rounds per shot. Assuming the weapon is already set up, a standard action, the procedure is as follows. Round 0, apply poison, which is optional. Apparently really optional if I just forget what poison he's using. Round 1, reload, which is a full round action. Round 2, cast True Strike as a standard action to gain +20 to hit on the first attack he makes within 1 round, but also manifest the Extend Range Psionic Warrior power, which is a swift action. Yes, he splashed 2 levels of Psionic Warrior, so he could poke holes in people from twice as far away. Round 3, cast Sniper's Shot, which is a swift action, to allow the use of his 5d6 sneak attack at long range, fire as a standard action, and then re-hide, taking huge penalties to do so as a move action. Of course, Spot suffers major distance penalties, -1 per 10 feet in theory, so from around 1,600 feet, this re-hiding makes it virtually impossible to spot him, so he can restart the whole process. The +20 to hit from True Strike more than counters the minus 14 range penalty in this case, meaning he's making his attack with plus 6 to hit. We all know my animation skills, though improving, are limited. Obviously, I wanted to make sure the monitor made a good show of things, and a lot of that was just spending more time adding special effects. The lightning bolt for his Incarnum power, adding to his first attack each round, the shockwaves passing through characters hit by Stunning Fist, etc. But there were also ways which I did step up my game slightly. The animation in TDDC is almost always of the most rudimentary kind possible, just moving or resizing elements on the screen, whereas most people would tell you that the word animation implies drawing multiple frames to show motion. Obviously, that is both a lot of work, and to show body parts moving and rotating requires some kind of artistic skill, so I avoid it like the plague. However, as many of you noticed, I did a bit of that with Black's distorted, exaggerated movement. You remember the one. In fact, if you're a fan of the anime Kill la Kill, it was probably very familiar. Even then, and even though the style of the scene I was paying homage to was very sketchy, I did a real halfway version, just drawing a couple versions of each body part, and using Premiere's motion features to scale and stretch them independently to do that thing he does. I must have done a half-decent job, because some people recognized the scene. The other thing I tried was using a little squash and stretch, an animation technique used to emphasize motion. This is pretty evident in a couple places where the cloaked monitor slides rapidly up to someone, where squashing before a movement, then stretching during it along the line of motion, can make the action look really quick and dynamic. That was cool in those two places, and I did it a tiny bit for a couple attacks, but one of the easiest and yet most effective uses was just in adding Hazov's cloak, really just like a cape. But I found that just adding a little bit of cape movement in shots where Hazov turns or moves rapidly made the whole thing look significantly more dynamic at a pretty low time cost. Capes are cool. There was one visual I really wanted to include, something I actually described in-game but couldn't fit in the video. When Hazov's Lawbearer charge connected with Little One, there was a visible bubble, an anti-entropy shockwave. A beaker was knocked off one of the lab tables, which strikes the ground, shattering into a symmetric pattern which looks like a puzzle you could just put back together. It's an effect I think I could have achieved decently, but it would have taken a bunch of time, which would not have paid off the same way Don't Attack Draven seems to have. By the time they are ready to teleport, they've decided to, mostly, not worry about GE7 having been possessed by a Dark Ancient. But I feel like my line read as the Warforged Priest sounds really suspicious, like a terrible liar saying, "I had no idea I was being followed," when it wasn't meant to be. He really didn't know he had been followed, or for how long. It just came out odd when I tried to do it in his voice. I don't do a whole lot for my Patreon patrons. My main excuse is that I work full-time, and unless I reach a point where I can try to make the leap to 100% YouTube, I'm not pushing to maximize Patreon revenue because I don't have the time to give you all that you guys deserve. But I do try to answer as many questions as I can, especially for my Patreon patrons. They get extras videos like this a week early so that I can answer some of their questions for this, the final version, which goes up free on YouTube. For example, Alexander Wood asked, "The fight didn't seem close, as you said. How close was the monitor to killing a PC? Did anyone even get bloodied?" When Hazov died, Little One was still nauseated for his next turn. Draven and DDF were around 50-60% health, Little One at maybe 60-75%, Black at 80-90%. The Diluvian had been spreading his damage in an inadvisable way due to overconfidence, and because his technique actually rewards spreading his attacks. The Zealot Pact made it a pretty unfair fight, but as I think I mentioned, the outcome would have been similar with no pact if the party had rolled more average on their Stunning Fist saves. Now, if we exclude the Zealot Pact and leave everything else the same, including the bad save rolls, Hazov was doing fine. He was around 40-45% health, but given his stunning success to this point, if Black hadn't been doing double damage, he would have had more time to realize how dangerous they were and to employ smarter tactics and some of the tricks he didn't get a chance to use. Sauto would have gotten off at least one more sniper shot for 20-30 damage, Though his angle is so limited, I would have rolled for the target. Beggars can't be choosers. Hazov still had a free attack he forgot to use on missed enemy attack, and he could have used his cloak's emergency escape invis to get clear of the building, spend a full round recovering all his maneuvers, and head in again. Plus, if he could drop any PC, or both DDF and GE7 to make the hit dice count, he'd recover one maneuver of choice immediately, because monitors like killing. And any round in which he could Lawbearer's Charge Little One again is a round where he's much less likely to take damage due to the +5 AC buff. That's still a ton of ifs, and overall he was not likely to win. But if everything had gone exactly the same without Zealot Pact, I'd give Hazov about a 25% chance to have dropped someone, once he got serious, and maybe a 5% chance to actually win, because with only 3 PCs, dropping one gives him back a maneuver and drastically cuts their options and DPS, possibly creating a real vicious circle. Jackson Jelinek asked, with the last second reveal that Seven is alive, I'm curious, how often had Draven been thinking about him? Did he have plans for another familiar if he found out that Seven died? I don't think Draven was thinking about Seven too often. It seemed like one of those things they might never find out, especially since it sounded likely that it just died. But after the Ginneron episodes, Draven used some weird feat about item familiars to turn the Ataran Don't Panic tome into a familiar-like intelligent thing, which gives him bonuses. It was an interesting idea, and it's a failure on my part that I never gave it any real characterization. He made a leather strap to hang the book off his belt, for practical reasons, so he doesn't have to literally carry it at all times. But in game terms, he has to have an otherwise free hand to put on the book in order to use its shield slot bonuses. Arthur D. Gonzalez-Martin asked, so, what is the main tactical role of monitors? And if they're so powerful and sneaky, why haven't they had them sneak into the capitals of humans, dwarves, elves, and other nations allied to the rival KT faction and mass assassinate them? When the Kuatoa actually assault a nation, they absolutely do that. The survival of any of the Verandi royal family is considered a miraculous sacrifice by the then king and his defenders, including the ancestors of Brother Fields. But philosophically, the KT don't consider most of the surface leaders to be relevant. If you kill the king of Vistria, some other human becomes king. If you kill the king of Tark or the prime minister of Larik, that nation will just elect another. When you are actually invading, that creates valuable chaos, disrupting the chain of command. But otherwise, one Dwarif or Human is pretty much the same as another, and they've actually found that it's surprisingly hard to assassinate these leaders. The nations have, in their own ways, developed very effective protections for their leaders. The dwarves have a legendary bodyguard for their king over the last couple centuries. The Psionic Academy secures the capital district of Bankton, and Vistria's capital, Castle, is a relatively hard nut to crack. And while they'd love to take out the Elven king and queen, knowing those two are powerful and probably not replaceable, the Diluvians are not in direct conflict with the elves right now due to the geography, and even they know there is some chance that sending a high-ranking Deathfin to take them out might actually fail, a terrible embarrassment and propaganda blow. And if it succeeded, it would definitely turn the elves from a supporting role into much more active participants in the KT Civil War. Those are the main reasons that most monitors are too busy in the spy versus spy battles between the Diluvians and Ilud to be sent on surface missions. Arthur also asked, why not use a gun for the sniper? Are there guns in your setting? You have techno-gnomes making golems that can fight or cut trees. Why not guns and cannons? I'm not against guns in all Magitech settings. However, I do have an aversion to them in this world. I think part of the reason is that I've allowed so much crazy Magitech, artificial sentience, both anthropomorphic and of the disembodied kind, full-on mecha-style golems, more machine-based than the old-school animated substance type, Magitech energy blasts of every kind, and, in rare cases, frickin' direct-fire rockets. I think there's a qualitative difference in feel that, with all that stuff so prominent, adding in gunpowder weapons, or anything that feels like them, would cross a line, taking us a bit farther than I want to go, from the sword and sorcery vibe, just in my eyes. I want to give a big thanks to all my generous Patreon patrons. There's certainly room for more of your questions. Thanks so much for your continued support, and with a special shout out to Sarosh, Surf USA, Gorefiend, Warsaw, Pericles, Lord Abon, Duskmire, Tyranno McGee, and Aether Mordew, the members of the organization. But for the many of you who can't or just don't feel like supporting me financially, I totally understand. I'll still make all my content available free on YouTube, but if you like it, please share it to help the channel grow. Your tweet or Facebook post can make a big difference.